So I want to do a video on politics and its place in religion, or place in churches. So I watched one of my favorite pastors do a sermon. He was doing really good until politics got injected into the sermon. Now there was a place where the politics were really elevated and they were really good. But then you just saw the sermon lose steam and it got weaker and weaker and weaker the more that he discussed politics. So the thing is that I think politics are just really bad when they're in the pulpit. I wrote about that in my 95 Theses because there was a YouTuber called Redeemed Zoomer who gave me the idea of writing a 95 Theses, and so I did. And you know, I'm a poet, so of course it's more like midrash than it is just like Martin Luther's theses. But one of the things I said is that you shouldn't talk about politics from the pulpit. This isn't about separation of church and state either. By all means, I'm not talking about that. I'm just going to say that there's poetry and then there's politics. So a sermon is poetry, and when you're in a sermon you should be poetic and you should speak to things with more of a eloquent and grand nature. But if you get into politics are always base. Every time I see a pastor, and this happens often, I listen to the radio a lot, every time I hear a pastor get into politics, it just gets rot. Okay, it can be any kind of politics. It just goes down. I don't mean like preaching against transgenderism or abortion or gay marriage, or you know, I don't mean those things. It's just when you get into the ways of the world, that's when it starts to get weak. Like when you start interpreting the Bible through worldly lenses. Like one of the things this preacher said is that Elijah shows you the 3 things you should do when you're stressed out, which is when he ran, he ate, he slept, and that's what you should do, is you gotta exercise, he ate and he slept. That's not actually remotely what that's about. You know, Elijah ran, it wasn't to get exercise, it was to get away from Ahab, him and his evil queen. And then he was exhausted, so God fed him and God provided for him when he was exhausted. The real sermon there is how if you need to get away and flee, you should, and God will take care of you. You should have faith that God will take care of you. That's the real sermon, not about resting, eating, and exercising. You know, he slept. Which, you know, he slept. It's not telling you he slept. It's like for some psychological thing. So, and that's a second point, is you should not have psychology in your sermons. Okay, now I'm very familiar with psychology. It's good for writing a character, but it's not really good for sermons, because you see what therapy does to people. It really makes them completely incompetent. You should not have therapy in your service. It just makes people completely incompetent. Any aspect of psychology, you should keep it out of your sermons. Interpret the Bible. In fact, I say with most psychology, just keep psychology out of psychology, because it's just very bad at understanding the human brain. Literature is very good. If you want to understand people, read literature. But psychology is very bad, unless it's Freud or basics like that. But then again, that's not therapy, that's just understanding how the human mind works. So I'd say, like, just get away from politics and psychology, okay? And also sociology too. Like it's one thing to explain how the world works. Like, we know fascism is bad, and we know that authoritarian regimes, they start to use fear. This is where the sermon was really good, because he was showing how fear was leading us down a path of oppression. But then it became more about politics, and then he got into COVID, and then he got into other things, the transgender issue, and it just started deflating from there. And I was just like, you know, I loved the sermon. I thought it was doing really well. This was like another sermon I watched where it's like, he's a really great pastor, one of my favorites. This guy's on point about a lot of things. And it's just, I think politics are very deflating, and they always have been, and it's just part of the world, and it's just, we should keep the world separated from our religion, is what I think I'm trying to say.